A man straps himself into something that barely looks big enough to be a go-kart. The wings are shorter than his own arms outstretched. There's no room to sit up straight. He lies back, almost flat, like he's climbing into a coffin instead of a cockpit. Then the jet engine behind his head screams to life. In seconds, he's doing over 300 miles an hour, faster than most fighter jets could manage on takeoff, in an aircraft that weighs less than the motorcycle parked in his garage. This is the BD-5J, the smallest jet aircraft ever built. It made one stunt pilot a Hollywood legend. It made a dozen more into air show icons. And over the decades, ordinary people, not just wealthy pilots, could build one in their own garage. By the late 1960s, Bede had already made a name for himself with practical kit planes like the BD-1 and BD-4, selling hundreds of them to weekend pilots. But he wanted something more radical. He wanted a fighter jet for the common man. Sleek, fast, fighter-like looks at a fraction of the cost of anything Cessna or Piper could offer. The result, unveiled in 1971 at the Oshkosh Air Show in Wisconsin, was the BD-5, a tiny bullet-shaped aircraft with a pilot lying nearly flat under a bubble canopy and an engine tucked directly behind the cockpit. It looked like it had flown straight out of a science fiction film, years ahead of anything else on the market. The public went insane for it. Bede didn't just sell a few kits, he took orders for thousands of them. By some counts, over 12,000 people put down deposits on a plane that barely existed yet, dreaming of the day a jet-black micro-fighter would sit in their own driveway, ready to be wheeled out and flown to work. But dreams this big rarely land as softly as they take off. Here's the part of the story most people never hear. The BD-5 needed an engine, a cheap, reliable, lightweight engine that ordinary builders could install themselves. Bede promised one, but the small two-stroke engine he'd chosen fell through when the plan to source it collapsed, leaving no dependable off-the-shelf motor for the kit that thousands of people had already paid for. Marketing had sprinted years ahead of engineering. Incomplete kits were shipped to customers who had paid full price, missing critical parts that simply hadn't been manufactured yet. Builders opened their crates to find half an airplane and no way to finish it. By the mid-1970s, the company that had promised affordable jet-age flight to the masses was bankrupt. Only a few hundred kits were ever actually completed. None of the promised factory-built FAA-certified versions were ever produced at all. Thousands of ordinary people who had handed over their savings for a piece of the dream were left with nothing but empty crates and broken promises. It should have ended there, a cautionary tale about a dream that flew too close to the sun and a company that flew straight into the ground. Except for one variant that refused to die. While Bede's engineers scrambled for a piston engine fix, someone floated a different idea entirely. Instead of a propeller, why not bolt an actual jet turbine onto this thing? It sounded absurd. The airframe was barely bigger than a large motorcycle, but the numbers worked. A small French turbojet, originally designed for motor gliders, slotted directly into that same tight fuselage, and it worked spectacularly well. The result was the BD-5J, a genuine functioning jet aircraft weighing under 360 pounds, not a glider with a jet strapped on, a real turbojet producing around 200 to 225 pounds of thrust, capable of pushing the tiny airframe past 300 miles an hour. It was small enough that a grown man could nearly pick up the tail section by himself. At the 1973 Oshkosh Air Show, the BD-5J set the crowd on fire, quite literally, becoming the talk of the aviation world overnight. It became, and remains to this day, one of aviation's most extraordinary footnotes, the world's smallest jet-powered aircraft, verified by Guinness World Records, a title it held for more than a quarter of a century. But something this small, this fast, and this unforgiving was never going to be gentle with the people who flew it. For a brief moment, Bede's showmanship reached its absolute, flying in tight formation and pulling off maneuvers, including quadruple vertical snap rolls that reportedly upstaged even the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels that same day. For one afternoon, it looked like Bede's dream had actually arrived. A private citizen's jet, built in a kit,
outflying the world's most famous military demonstration team. But that same month, behind the scenes, the cracks were already showing. Within months, the company that had produced this spectacle would be finished. The plane had triumphed, the business hadn't. In 1983, millions of people around the world saw the BD-5J for the first time without even knowing its name. Audiences who had never heard of Jim Bede or his bankrupt company now knew this shape, small, silver, impossibly fast, as one of cinema's most jaw-dropping practical stunts. For a plane born out of financial ruin, it was an incredible second life.
But how it looked like nothing else in the sky. Painted in bold sponsor liveries, a Budweiser jet, a Coors Silver Bullet, a Bud Light jet, it became a fixture of American air shows through the 1970s, 80s, and beyond, ripping through tight rolls and knife-edge passes low over the crowd. But this was an aircraft with almost no forgiveness built into it. Its tiny wings and high wing loading meant it flew fast and could depart from controlled flight with very little warning. Its size made it nearly invisible to other air traffic, and because so few were ever built, barely a handful flying at any given time, there was no long, deep safety record to lean on. Every flight was still, in some sense, a test flight. Over the following decades, that unforgiving nature caught up with pilot after pilot. In 1992, an experienced airline transport pilot was killed performing a low aerobatic maneuver at an air show when his BD-5J failed to recover. In 2006, two BD-5J pilots died within days of each other, one performing a radar calibration flight for military testing off the coast of Maryland, the other practicing his airshow routine near Ottawa, Canada, in an aircraft nicknamed the Stinger, one of only a handful of BD-5 jets flying anywhere in the world at the time. In 2013, a pilot flying for Austria's Flying Bulls display team was killed after an engine failure forced a landing attempt near Innsbruck. In 2015, a pilot bound for an air show in Ireland radioed a mayday call reporting engine failure and fire moments before going down. And in 2019, a pilot departing Camarillo, California, reported trouble gaining altitude shortly after takeoff before crashing. The BD-5J is proof of something aviation keeps teaching us again and again. The smaller the margin for error, the bigger the story left behind.